Folks, Poor Things. I watched it yesterday. Still mostly fresh in my mind. In the theater, we watched it. It was a good time overall. I enjoyed it. Um, I would say it's not my favorite Yorgos Lanthimos film. I think The Favorite actually is my favorite. The film from 2018, which also had Emma Stone in it, had Rachel Weisz, Olivia Colman. Uh, that one I think was a more complete film in the sense of uh, more just the story and the structure was more felt more complete in my eyes, um, and just overall, I think a better film. But this one, Poor Things, was good too. It was more fantastical. I did write a letterboxd review. Let's go through it. Let's see it. Let's read it. Poor Things. Watching Bella grow in and reject a polite patriarchal society is more than delightful. Though the film's empowering message feels incomplete, as it only teases us with socialist aspirations. Perhaps I'm satisfied that Poor Things transcends the born sexy yesterday cliche, with colorful and irresistible whimsy. So I guess we'll talk a little bit about the premise of the movie. So if you want to go in completely clean, maybe tune out right now. I'm not gonna go too much into details. And I'll try to avoid any major stuff. But the main idea is that Emma Stone plays this Bella character who her character passes, and Willem Dafoe's character Godwin revives her. It's kind of like a take on Frankenstein in a way. So she's kind of a reanimated corpse, right? And so really, it's like a coming of age story of Bella finding her way in the world after she is able to, uh, leave her father or gods. She calls him God, as home and explore the world uh, with first with Mark Ruffalo's character, who swoons her in a way, um, and so it's kind of like it's also kind of like a feminist allegory to a story, through her perspective as Bella sees kind of like what it's like to live in this world and the realities and the horrors of it, and how she makes her way through and how she confronts a polite society, um, and how she's like brash and quite delightful at times, the way she puts words together, um, and she kind of rejects any notion of what it is to be ladylike, a proper lady. So it's cool. It's interesting. Very whimsical. A lot of colorful imagery, great imagery, wonderful costuming, set design. It's kind of like set in a Victorian-esque world, so antiquated in that way, but it's still like a fanciful world, not quite realistic, kind of magical realism to it. Science fictiony, etc. Um, but yeah, but I think my main issue with the movie, I guess, is that it kind of like ends right where I want it to begin. Almost like I feel like we could have perhaps truncated her journey a little bit and focused more on what happens afterwards, because basically she matures throughout the movie and really becomes herself at the end, and I wanted to see her as more of a matured adult woman in this world, and how she lives her life that way now that she's grown as a character. And I think that like the film does, as I say in this review here, it does tease us with a little bit of these socialist ideas. She does mention that she goes to these socialist meetings, but we never quite see those meetings. And I do wish the film kind of addressed more of the class struggle, because it is through a perspective of Bella, who has a lot of privilege, right? She comes from a privileged household, and she's kind of has a stint in Paris where she basically becomes she becomes a sex worker, right, a prostitute, and um, in that scene she learns how it is to live, to have to earn her own money, etc., etc. But she also has the opportunity to leave and escape, and go back to her cushy London house eventually, right? So it's through her eyes, and I wish maybe the girlfriend she makes at the brothel, perhaps they could have shown more of her lifestyle, as well. And but in a way, it's kind of like, she does like learn to have sympathy for other humankind eventually. And there's scenes where she sees that there's poor people in the world and there's people who are suffering, and she doesn't quite know how to deal with it. She is naive at that point, and that's part of the story, her being naive and her like growing out of it. But I do wish the story leaned more into that, and offer that other perspective as well, not just her, her privileged white life, perspective. And there's definitely some criticism from some reviewers and stuff that perhaps the film is not quite the feminist ideal that some people would think it is. It is empowering for her, and she does in the way control her destiny in the film. She takes control of the men in her life. She rejects them. She doesn't like allow them to set those boundaries and to tell her how to act and be. And so she has a lot of agency in this movie, and which is great and feels empowering. But again, it's from her privileged perspective, and doesn't quite fulfill those socialist aspirations I think the film teases. And particularly, I think some people have issues with the whole the sex scenes in general, and her time as a sex worker, which I don't completely agree. I think of course the movie isn't the most sophisticated look at sex work, but I think it does offer enough. It does offer some critique of it, right? Some critique of the idea that she has to work under this madam, right? She's not complete in control. She does want to give more power to some of the working ladies there, but the madam, kind of like says like, oh, that's not how the world works. You can't choose your clients, etc., etc. So it'd be nice if maybe there was moments where there was a scene where she could have maybe unionized with the sex workers there and took over the whole brothel. Maybe that could have been something interesting, but of course the movie doesn't go that far, and maybe it's not that interested in it because really it's just kind of an episode in her life where she does move on from. But it does present the idea that as a woman in this world, she has the autonomy to do as she pleases with her body, and she realizes that like this is at the moment in her circumstances is the best way to make money and to have some independence in her life by becoming a sex worker, right? Even though if it's under working for this madame, this pimp sort of woman, right? Some people have said that perhaps the movie is a little bit too glamorous in that respect, and that the character Bella enjoys her exploitation, but I don't really think that's the view of the film. I don't think she really enjoys it. She's just more like pragmatic about it, right? At a certain point, there's a line where she's like, "Oh, she says to Mark Ruffalo's character, who is upset about, like most misogynist men, that she's taking control of her life, and he's upset that she's working as a sex worker, right? And she says that well, she is her own means of production or something like that. Some allusion to the idea of like owning the means of production. The common, the typical socialist phrasing of workers owning the means of production, and that's how we succeed in socialism, right? By giving workers power. Of course, I feel like it is even a little bit naive of her at that point too, and I think the film is maybe aware that she's in complete control, because again, she's not really working for herself. Really, she's not in the sex workers aren't really in control of the brothel, but she's at least figures that she's control of her body, and so in that way, perhaps again, it doesn't explore fully those themes, and so maybe the film is saying like, oh, it's like she may think she has some control, but really she's not complete control. So she's still in like a naive phase. That's how I interpret it a little bit, but yeah. So I feel like, she feels like it's probably, I think the film in general is just saying that like sex work is just another form of labor, right? So in that way, it's a sex positive message, and I don't necessarily think the film is completely ignoring the negative aspects of it, or glamorizing the life of a sex worker, right, or of a prostitute. Though I do think that like they could have focused more on someone that wasn't the Bella character, right? They could have focused on her girlfriend, on her friends there, the other workers who perhaps didn't have as much of a choice like Bella did to actually engage with that life. And and when she left Paris, and so did with her friend, the other sex workers had to stayed behind. Like, what about their lives? How about and what led these women to be here? So they didn't really explore that. So I agree with that critique. But in general, I don't really think the sex scenes were, shot too exploitatively or very, of course it was shot by a man, Yorgos Lanthimos, but it struck me as like pertinent to her growth as a character, right? And it made sense in the movie. It wasn't gratuitous, or didn't feel like pornographic or anything to me. And of course Emma is also considered an executive producer, Emma Stone, and there was intimacy coordinators. So I don't have too much issue with those scenes. It's mostly that I think the movie didn't delve deeper into the class struggle there, right? And also, or even race either, because it was it was a very white focused film about these privileged people, really, Bella being one of them. And how the movie ends. So again, this could be a little bit spoilery. I feel like Bella kind of retreats into a cushier life, at the end, right? And she brings her friend along from the brothel, and it seems like she's content now and ready to become a surgeon and a doctor, right? Leaving behind her life in Paris. And in a way, you can still see it in the way that, oh, she's just going to be a socialist doctor perhaps, and she will be concerned about the working people, but it's also kind of vague enough where you can interpret it as her like kind of just not concerned with that anymore and just focused on herself and her friends around her, living in more a privileged lifestyle in London and stuff. So it's kind of vague in that way. But I think like overall, because the film in general is just so so whimsical and unabashedly liberating in a way for this character, specifically for Bella. It's just a fun watch. It's just like entertaining in that way, and that kind of like overcomes any of the, like any of my like criticisms of the movie. You know, it's like overall, it's like I definitely would recommend the movie for anybody interested in this type of story, right? And you know, and out of all of Yorgos Lanthimos, how do you pronounce him? His films, this may even be his most accessible, I think. You know, and probably his most his most happiest, his happiest film in general. You know, it's not as, I think the rest, particularly his earlier films, are very cynical and kind of mean spirited in a way. And then the favorite perhaps is more satirically funny, in a bit tragic in certain ways, but this one, Poor Things, feels a lot more heartwarming in the end, right? Even though there was, you know, Bella has to go through a lot of you know, some dark elements in her life. You know, she has to like go through that and experience that. In the end, she comes out, you know, a fulfilled, matured woman. You know. So those are my I guess my general thoughts on Poor Things. Perhaps we will do a breakdown later on, a spoiler breakdown, when the movie comes out for the home release. But yeah, it's not like it probably could still be. I think it might still be in my top 10 of the year, but it's probably going to be like in the middle of it, or you know. I think even something like May December, I think is a more overall enjoyable movie. I think for me, for my taste. But yeah, I gave it 4 to 5. Poor Things.